For anyone who wants to move abroad, listen up because this is maybe what you're looking for. So, number one, the biggest impact is peace. That sense of peace that I have here is something that I just don't think was attainable or is attainable for me back in the US. Hi, my name is Cepee, rhymes with Peppy, and I'm going to let you know how I've been able to live and work in Spain for the last 8 years as an American. It is a beautiful spring day here in Malaga, and this is my neighborhood. So I live about 2.5 miles from Malaga city center, here in a residential area. You can see these beautiful Spanish-inspired architecture houses behind me. It's a pretty chill area to live, removed from the city center, but close enough to where I can just hop on a bus and be there in 15 minutes. And probably one of my favorite things about this area is that I just live an 8-minute walk from the beach. So I'm going to show you that next. So there are different ways down to the beach, but I'm going to take this more scenic path here. Here along the beach is where I will do my morning runs. Sometimes I'll meet up with a friend for breakfast, and very infrequently, I should probably do it more, but if I need a break during the workday, I'll even come here and sit on the beach, and if it's warm enough, take a dip. I'm so excited to share my journey with you. If you are out there wondering if a move abroad is possible, I just want to tell you that it is. And also, a move abroad is possible at any age. And I'm the founder of She Hit Refresh, a community for women aged 30 and over who want to move abroad. I teach women, specifically US citizens, how to move to Europe. In this video, I'm going to share my own move abroad story and let you know how I've been able to live and work in Spain for the last 8 years. So my story begins in Houston, Texas. That's where I am from. I'm the daughter of immigrants, Iranian and Colombian, and now I'm an immigrant myself living here in Malaga, Spain. So while I moved to Spain in 2015, I had actually spent time in the country many times before. The first time I ever came to Spain was in 2001 when I was a college student, and I came to Madrid to study Spanish, not with an exchange program, but actually just on my own, studying Spanish at a language academy. And I fell for Madrid so hard. It instantly felt like my place in the world. And that's where that seed was planted that maybe one day I would like to live in Spain. And I will say, actually, throughout my 20s, I tried and failed many times to move to Spain, but it was such an uphill battle. I studied Spanish in Spain, as I mentioned. I taught English, and I also did a master's in Spain, but none of those led to long-term living. The problem was there really wasn't a viable option for me to stay, so I would always have to move back to the US after all of those stints. There weren't that many options for US citizens. Really, my main option was to teach English in Spain, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. But now there are so many more options with the rise of remote work and digital nomad visas and different kinds of visas popping up all over Europe and around the world. So it's actually never been easier to do something like this. But in my case, when I first came to Spain in 2015, I actually had to teach English. So I did that through the NALCAP program, which is also known as the North American Language and Culture Assistant Program. And that is one of Spain's most popular Teach English programs. Now, again, I didn't want to teach English when I came at 35, but it was my foot into the door. I knew that this program would get me to Spain because at the time I really didn't have other options. And I knew once I got here, I would figure out a way to make it work. While I was teaching in that program, I was sending resumes out left and right to companies to try to find a job in marketing, which is what my background is in. And I got really lucky, and a Spanish startup offered to sponsor my visa and hire me at their company. Now, I do want to say getting a work visa sponsorship as a US citizen in Europe is extremely difficult. So I feel like a lot of luck came into play for me, but I also will point out that I had been applying for jobs in Spain since 2007, and it wasn't until 2016 that somebody was willing to sponsor my visa. So I definitely want to stress that this is a difficult route. I didn't really love that job, so I ended up quitting and actually had to find a different visa to stay. And that's when I learned about Spain's non lucrative visa. On that visa, I was able to work remotely and live in Spain, but that was the challenge. I had to find remote work, and this was in 2017 when it wasn't so prevalent as it is now. But I was able to find online work in social media, community building, and content writing. And that's what I did until I became a Spanish citizen. Yes, so I am now a Spanish citizen, and that happened in 2022. So you can see my journey here in Spain is a very winding road, but I was determined to make this work on my terms. And I had that tenacity to stick it through. And now, as I mentioned, it's been 8 years, and I am living my best life here. I want to add that Spain now has a digital nomad visa. This was not available when I was trying to find my way here, or else I would have jumped on this. So if you are looking to move to Spain, I highly recommend Spain's digital nomad visa as an in to be able to live in Spain long term. Now, while I love my life here in Spain and I have no regrets about moving here, of course, there are challenges to uprooting your life and starting fresh in a new country. So I just want to talk about some of those challenges that I've had living here. And I think that the number one is just being far away from family and friends. And Spain is very, very far away from where everybody lives. So it's not that easy to see each other as much as we would like to. But I do go back to the US once or twice a year to spend time with family, and I try to do that for as long as I can. I do spend anywhere from 1 to 3 months in the US per year. Another challenge to living in Spain has been learning the language. I just thought learning a language was so much easier. And having a parent from Latin America, my mother's from Colombia, she didn't teach me Spanish, but I feel like I absorbed a lot just hearing her speak with her family. I had studied Spanish in high school and, of course, here in Spain as well. And my Spanish is really, really good. But still, I have not, even after 8 years, reached that level to where I feel 100% myself in Spanish, the way I do in English. So for me, I've really come to realize that learning a language is a lifelong endeavor, at least for me. And it's something that I've come to accept that I probably will never be perfect, but I can strive for that. But I still got to keep putting in the work. And I think the third challenge that a lot of people are facing, especially locals and even more so locals, are those rising costs of living. And this has happened around the world. This is not a unique to Spain problem, but the costs have really changed even just in the last 8 years since I moved here in 2015. And I will say, yes, of course, in the last 2 or 3 years since the pandemic. So those are some of the challenges, but I definitely want to talk about what I love about living here because this is where I have chosen to live and I definitely have some reasons why. And number one is safety. As a woman, I can say that I have never felt so safe as I do here in Spain. Now, of course, as a woman, you always have to have your guard up because bad things can happen anywhere else in the world. But I will say that walking around, when I lived in Madrid, walking around as a woman at night, I just felt so safe. And those are things that I wouldn't even dare to do back in the US in a lot of cities. So that sense of safety gives me a different kind of freedom that I don't think I felt back home. And I hear that a lot from a lot of women who live here in Spain. What I also love about Spain is the culture. Now, if you've been to Spain, you have experienced this warm, lively, and energetic culture where life is lived on the streets and you just feel the joy of people and their will to live here. It's incredible. It's infectious. And that's really what I fell in love with when I first went to Madrid many, many moons ago in 2001 was that energy. And that's why I always loved living in Madrid, of just being able to walk around and soak that energy in as you're just, having your day, passing through the streets, getting from one destination to the other. I also love the diversity of Spanish culture. So a lot of people have one image of Spain where it's flamenco and bullfighting and siestas. And that is somewhat true to an extent in certain areas, but Spain is so much more than that. If you go to the Basque region, the language and culture is quite distinct. Also, if you go to Catalonia, where Barcelona is, there's a whole nother language there and culture as well. The same if you go to Galicia in the northwest, and just every little corner in the country feels like it has its own unique culture, which makes Spain such an incredible place to live because there's so much to explore. And one of my favorite things about living here is the proximity to the rest of Europe. Spain is very well connected and great flights from Madrid, Malaga, and a lot of the other major airports in the country. So I've definitely taken advantage of that, of enjoying living in Spain, but taking those city breaks to be able to travel to new countries and see what it's like to live there. Now, people might be waiting for me to say that I love Spanish food. But I'm sorry to say, I may be one of the people in the minority here that don't love Spanish food. Ah, blasphemous, right? I am a pescatarian, and here in Malaga, there's plenty for me to eat in terms of seafood. But with Spanish food itself, I find it to be a bit limited in what I can eat. And also, I just don't love it. I love more flavorful food, maybe Mexican food, Thai food, Indian food. So maybe you can see why Spanish isn't my favorite cuisine, but people do love it, and there are definitely delicious things when it comes to Spanish cuisine. So Pedregalejo is the name of the area that I live, and the beach side, Pedregalejo Beach, is a historic fishing area of Malaga. It is historic and it is known for its fabulous seafood. As we'll see in just a minute, the beach area is littered with chiringuitos, which are beachside restaurants where you can eat fresh fish and fried fish, which really is a treat here in Malaga. In the summer, this area is packed with people, Spaniards and foreigners that come here to spend their summer holidays on Pedregalejo. Here in Pedregalejo, you can see here behind me, way back there is Malaga City Center. But I want to show you what's happening here on the Paseo Marítimo, also known as the promenade or the boardwalk here in Pedregalejo. So let's go take a look. So I want to talk a little bit about why I moved to Spain. So as we know, I fell in love with Madrid hard many years ago. And when I moved here in 2015, as I mentioned, I moved back to Madrid. And I lived in Madrid for 5 years before moving to Malaga, where I am now. But I want to talk about why I moved back and why I moved to Madrid specifically again. And that is because to me, Madrid is the best city in the world to live in by far. And I miss living in Madrid every day. And hopefully one day I'll move back. But right now, my life is in Malaga. But I do want to share why specifically I left the US for Madrid. So in the US, I actually had a pretty good life. And I like to say that I had a good life, but something was pulling me towards something greater. When I left the US, I had a good job. I was living that conventional life. I had my condo, my car. I had a few friends, but there was just something about living there. At the time, I lived in Austin, Texas, and it just didn't feel fulfilling for me. I really felt like there was something missing from my life. My life felt very much like Groundhog Day. Wake up, go to work, go to the gym, come back home, and Netflix. And it was very monotonous, and that is not how I like to live my life. And that's when I had thought about moving back to Spain because I just felt like it gave me a lifestyle that I felt so alive in a way that I didn't feel back home. Also, at the time, my life wasn't following that conventional path of success that I feel like is there's a bit of societal pressure around that, especially for women in the US. And so I wasn't on that trajectory of, go to school, graduate, get a good job, climb the corporate ladder, keep up with the Joneses, buy a house, get married, have kids. That just wasn't what I wanted in my life at the time. Yes, I had the home and I had the job, but climbing the corporate ladder and then marriage and kids just were not on my radar at the time, and that wasn't for me. And in many ways, I was starting to feel like an only because people around me, everyone around me, was following this path, and I felt a little bit like, what is wrong with me, right? And in Spain, I always had this sense of belonging here. And so it was something, yeah, that I was yearning for, to be a part of a place where I felt more accepted. And I will say in Spain, the people get married a lot later, and get married a lot less. That's what I want to say. And also, they have one of the lowest birth rates in Europe. So not everybody's lives are focused around having kids. So for me, that was very comforting to know that there was a city I could move to where I wasn't going to be an only anymore. Actually, I was going to find an abundance of people who were just like me. I was also seeking a culture where there's just a slower pace of life. And I always found that in Spain compared to the US. And also somewhere where work wasn't your entire identity. In the US, that's one of the first questions you ask someone when you meet them is, what do you do for work, right? What do you do? And I don't find that that is the same in Europe, or in Spain at least, where that isn't just how you identify yourself by your job. You actually have a lot of different ways to identify yourself, and there's a lot of other important facets to who you are other than what you do for work. And I think some of the other reasons are ones that are drawing people now in droves to leave the US is that people want to live somewhere that is less expensive for them. People want to live somewhere where they can have a healthier lifestyle, and also want to have access to affordable health care. Those were all things that were drivers for me. And I think another big one for me is I wanted to have a more active social life. Yes, I could have had that in Austin, and Austin is a very social city, but I just wasn't finding my people there. And in Spain, especially Madrid, that was a place where I felt like I was connecting, like I said, with a lot of people who were like me, who were single, child free, and there were just a lot of activities that were going on in the city. So that's why I moved to Madrid. And after 5 years in Madrid, that's when I decided to change things up. That was in 2020 during COVID. As you may have heard, Spain had a very harsh lockdown during the pandemic. And so after a few months of dealing with that in Madrid, when things opened up a little bit, a lot of my friends were moving to the coast of Spain who had been living in Madrid. And I thought, why not? I could do that too. I work remotely. I can just go to the coast for a little bit. For me, it was just a short-term plan of 6 months of living in Malaga, and then I was going to return to Madrid. But life had other plans for me. So now I live in Malaga, which is very different from my life in Madrid. Madrid, I was living in a hustle and bustling city, and now I live in a city that is on the Mediterranean. I have Mediterranean views right now, and my life is even at a much slower pace. And that is the beauty of Spain. There's so many different ways to live your Spanish life here. My life in Malaga is very different from my life in Madrid, and both of these lives that I've had here are very different from how I lived in the US. Let's talk a little bit about affordability, because I know people are very curious about how much things cost and what is the cost of living in Spain. So this has changed a lot since I moved here in 2015. And I do want to say, when we talk about affordability or cost of living, this is all very relative. Compared to most US cities, Spain is very affordable. So when I talk about affordability, I can't just give you one number and say this is how much you need to live in Spain, because affordability is really going to be based on your income and your lifestyle. So you may hear people saying, like, yes, you can live in Spain on $1,000 to $2,000 a month. That may be true in some areas in the country. Also, if you have roommates, if you're living in more student housing, that can be true. But I actually think it is not possible to live well on $1,000 to $2,000 a month anymore in Spain. And this is definitely true if you want to live in a big city in Spain, if you want to live by yourself, if you want to live in the city center, if you want to live in a renovated apartment. I think you're going to have to increase your budget a little bit to make it work. So when I moved to Malaga from Madrid, my apartment in Madrid, I was actually paying €1,000 a month in 2020. It was central. It was a one bedroom. I lived by myself. Very cute apartment, renovated, looking over a beautiful street in Madrid. It was about 400 square feet. And people were saying that I was paying a lot for what I was getting. I would say that you probably can't even find anything around that in the Madrid city center anymore. But I was paying $1,000 at the time. And when I moved to Malaga in 2020, I found a 2-bedroom that was 900 square feet, and I just paid €700 a month. So you can definitely see the price difference there. Now, fast forward to today, I think a 1-bedroom in Malaga city center is probably on par with what a 1-bedroom in Madrid is now. But as you can see, this is still going to be more affordable than most major cities in the US. Of course, you can find apartments for less, whether that's word of mouth, things that aren't listed online. And again, like I said, finding an apartment that maybe has shabby furniture, kind of more student housing, and not something that's going to be nice and new and renovated. Now, let me give you an idea of a few of my costs living here. For groceries, weekly groceries, for me and my partner, we probably spend anywhere from about 50 to 70 euros a week. Shopping at places like Carrefour, Lidl, or Aldi. Eating out, I mean, you can spend as little as 10 to 15 euros, up into 50, 60 if you'd like per person. I would say on average, when I go out to dinner, if I'm splitting the bill, my half is anywhere from 15 to 20 euros for a nice meal, or if we're sharing tapas. And wine is probably included in that price. And I would say my wine is about 3 to 4 euros per glass. Let's talk about transportation or getting around. So for me, I use my feet to get to most places, but sometimes I also use the bus. A single bus ticket in Malaga costs €1.40 for that, but I buy the ticket in bulk. So I have my 10 tickets that I buy at a time. And for those 10 tickets, it's just €4.20. Next is phone and internet. So my cell phone plan and my home internet are on the same plan, and I pay 35 euros a month for that. People are often curious about what electricity costs, and I will say electricity is more expensive in Europe in general than it is in the US. And here in a place like Malaga, sometimes in the winter you might use the heat, but very rarely. But in the summer, it's true, you do need to have air conditioning because it does get very, very hot and humid here. So I will say our electric bill ranges from anywhere from maybe 30 euros a month to 60, 70 euros a month, depending on how much we're using it. And last but not least, if you're interested in going to the gym, it's going to cost you around 40 euros a month. So those are just some basic costs to give you an idea. Again, it is very affordable to live in Spain if you're coming from the US with the US salary, but please do keep in mind that prices are going up and locals are struggling to keep up with these prices. So that's a bit about my journey of living and working in Spain. I do want to just talk about, before we go, a little bit about how living in Spain has impacted my life. So for anyone who wants to move abroad, listen up, because this is maybe what you're looking for. So number one, the biggest impact is peace. That sense of peace that I have here is something that I just don't think was attainable or is attainable for me back in the US. I've already talked about safety, but just that sense of safety gives me this feeling of freedom and peace like I've never had before. I will also say just I'm less stressed in general. Being able to live comfortably, to afford to live the way I want to live without having to really work myself to death the way I would have to in the US, has really changed my stress levels here. I feel so much more at ease. And I also don't have that societal pressure of having to fit into the mold like I did in the US. And I really felt that pressure because I never felt like I fit into the box that everybody wanted me to fit into. And here in Spain, I can be free to live how I want to. And without sounding too dramatic, really moving abroad, moving to Spain, really did change the trajectory of my life. I talk about this a lot in the work I do in helping women who want to move abroad, is that moving abroad is not just about changing countries and having this fun experience in a different place. For me, moving abroad really was this opportunity to shed what was not working in my life in the US. I was doing a lot of things that I didn't want to do, right? I had fallen into a path that wasn't really a path that I had chose. It's just a path that society really laid out for me. So by moving abroad, I was able to actively create a life that was in alignment with how I wanted to live. For me, it really was that refresh. Like I say, it's She Refresh. It was a refresh on my life, resetting my life, and really being able to create a life on my terms. And I don't mean that by saying that you are completely changing who you are and becoming someone that you're not. I actually think a move abroad can allow you to become more of who you are, because you are set free from those expectations of society, family, community, and maybe even some built-in expectations that you have of yourself. And I think that's something you definitely notice when you move abroad. It is this journey of self-discovery, and there's a lot of things that you can unlock that allow you to become more of yourself in a way that you may not be able to in your home country. So I think that's how moving to Spain really impacted me. It allowed me to delve into different interests and skills that I really didn't even know that I had. And when I moved to Spain at 35, I started blogging. I was never a writer. So that was something completely new and creative that I got to do. And from doing that, then I became a community builder, building community around creatives online. And that led to starting my own company, She Hit Refresh. And so these are all things that when I look back, I just do not think that they would have been possible back in the US. I think in the US, I would have followed that conventional path of just doing the 9 to 5 until you retire. And so moving to Spain allowed me to choose something else that was more in alignment with who I am and how I want to live. I love living here in Spain, and I'm so grateful to my former self for having that courage to leave my comfort zone and leap into the unknown. And as I always say, moving abroad or deciding to move abroad at 35 was the best decision of my 30s. I hope you've enjoyed learning more about my life here in Spain, whether that was in Madrid or now here in Malaga. If you're interested in moving to Spain and have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to help. And if you're a woman age 30 and over, come find me on She Hit Refresh. We would love to make your move abroad dreams come true.